Hey, welcome back to Last Month in Security. We've got a very special guest today, Theresa Payton, my very dear friend. Theresa, welcome to the show.
So glad to be here. I'm just delighted we were able to get this on the calendar. Been looking forward to it.
Yes, absolutely. As we were talking about, your scheduling is a monster. So thank you for making the time for us. We really appreciate it. Of course, I've got my co-hosts here for the panel, our Chief Security and Trust Officer, Ben Carr, and our CISO, Stacey Cameron. Thanks for joining me, guys. Appreciate it. I'm just going to jump right in here, Theresa. Fantastic career. We'll have you tell us a little bit about it. I'll just mention first and only female White House CIO, best-selling author. Some of your books, Protecting Your Internet Identity, Are You Naked Online? And Privacy in the Age of Big Data, which you co-wrote with Ted Claypool. Ted, wonderful guy. I haven't seen him for a while. Maybe I'll see him at RSA. And then, of course, Manipulated, which has been a huge hit, and we'll talk a little bit about that later here in the show. But first off, just tell us a little bit about your background and your career path, and how you got to where you're at now as CEO of Fortalice.
Yeah, no, thanks, Anthony. I really appreciate it. And so I'll keep it brief because it's been an incredible journey, such a blessing of a journey, actually. And I often say to people, it's a career that came and found me and chose me. So if you had, I just had one of my three kids graduate from college and start in the workforce, and so I've been talking to a lot of my son's classmates who are trying to get in the workforce, and they're like, "How did you get where you are?" I'm like, "Well, if you had asked my version of yourself, at your age, what I'd be doing, what I would have told you was, I'm going to go to international trade finance. I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to do these big international deals. And then one day I'm going to run for the US Senate." And like, that was like the plan. And interestingly enough, Anthony, I think I've shared this with you before. I'm in my senior year of college and making plans to get married and trying to figure out where we're going to get orders and how I'm going to get started on this life plan of mine. And I got a call out of the blue. And this is kind of the story of my life. We got a call out of the blue from University of Virginia. They had a Master of Science program. They had just started in management information systems, and they didn't have women apply. And so they were looking for women who had the right backgrounds to try and encourage them to come. And they ended up offering me a full paid scholarship between a scholarship, a teaching assistantship, and a research assistantship. And just what an incredible journey, and what a great program they have in place. I'm still very involved with the McIntyre School and with the program, trying to meet with the students and the deans every year as much as I can, sometimes more than once a year. And then from there, my husband had orders to Mayport, Florida. So I wrap up my graduate degree. I'm all ready to hit the world, running in technology now, and Mayport, Florida. So for those of you who aren't familiar where that is, it's Jacksonville, Florida. It's an awesome city. I loved it there. But as I'm moving there, I realized this is not a hotbed of technology in the 90s. And I literally, for those of you out there who might be looking for work right now, I just want to let you know, like, I literally couldn't get a job as an assistant manager at a shoe store. I was applying, getting rejected, and it was like the old school application process. Like, you had to mail a resume and all of that stuff. And I couldn't even get a job at the mall. That's how bad the job market was. And I literally was just like writing cover letters, applying for everything, getting rejection after rejection. And I'm sitting in the lab one night grading papers. I'm the only person in my program who doesn't have a job. Everybody else already has a job. I'm grading papers, looking at people's programs. And my friend Sarah says to me, "Theresa, did you get a job yet?" I'm like, "Nope, I can't even get a job selling shoes." And she was like, "Oh, it's going to happen." She goes, "You know what? My college roommate has a friend in banking. You don't want to work at a bank, do you?" And I said, "I just want to be employed. I will work anywhere. I will do anything." And she's like, "Well, he's in finance, but I'm sure he knows somebody in technology." Long story short, I find out later after he and I talk, we have this great conversation. He's like, "We're going to send you a plane ticket," because that's in the old days when you actually had to have a physical plane ticket. "We're going to send you a plane ticket, fly you down. We need people like you." This is after an hour talking to him on the phone. So I go to the library, I go to the MBA library at the Darden School at UVA, and I get the annual report for Barnett Bank. And I find out Steve's not just in finance, he is the CFO of the entire bank.
Oh,
So
wow.
again, like kind of this like it's amazing how, God and the universe just like these, things happen. So I interview and I get the job and like what a blessing. I would have never told you I was gonna like love technology and banking, but it was like the golden age of technology and banking. So I got to work on mobile banking. I got to work on phone VRU banking and self-service and web-enabled ATMs and expert systems and
And
AI
this is
algorithms.
all
Really,
just happened, right? Exciting
yeah,
time.
yeah. And so, fast forward, I'm in banking. I'm now 16 years into my career. And absolutely, I thought I was going to retire in banking. Honestly, I loved it so much because it's many different businesses under one roof.
And
And
that's now you're at B of A. Is that correct?
yeah, so I'm now at B of A, and what I love about banking for anybody who hasn't worked in banking before, and you may have you and want to work there, would you? Financial services finances everybody's dreams, right? And so like if you want a car, you want a house, you want to start a small business, like financial services finances and backs everybody's dreams. And so it's just an amazing place to work. So I'm literally at work, and I know Anthony knows this story, and I'll keep it short. So I'm back from maternity leave way too early with my second son because the bank's going through a merger and things are not going well. So I literally get a call from HR saying, "Can you come back early?" I come back to work early. And I'm exhausted. I've got, two little ones at home. And the executive assistant for the group of us says, "Miss Theresa, before you leave," because, I live in the South, right? So, "Miss Theresa, before you leave, this is one phone call you have to return before you leave. I promised them you would call them back." And I said, "Well, who is it?" And I had just been with regulators all day and everything with this merger and acquisition. She says, "Well, it was the White House." And I said, "The apple juice company or the clothing company?" And she just looks at me and she goes, "Miss Theresa, you're very tired, but no, the White House at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue." And I'm looking at her, I said, "How do they know what's going on here? Am I in trouble?" And she goes, "Oh, no, silly. President George W. Bush needs a new chief information officer. And they called you to see if you'd be interested in applying." And I said, "He called me himself." And she said, "Of course not, silly. He's busy." I'm like, "See, that's where they get you. This is social engineering. It's a total fraud. I'm not calling them back." And she's like, "You cannot leave until you call them back." So I literally have her standing there. I'm like, "Watch this." So I'm like, I was completely cheeky,
Yeah,
completely.
you thought it was a fish.
So I treated them like that. Okay. I can't believe they still let me interview and have the job. But so I called and I was like, "Hey, I heard President George W. Bush is obviously too busy to call me himself." So I go through this whole thing with Bridget, who works at my firm. And she's a partner in the firm. So I go through this whole thing. She's like, "Oh, this is awesome that you called back." So I'm talking to her and John. I'm like, "Well, you guys are going to have to identify yourself because, first of all, guys, there's no LinkedIn." So the fact that Bridget tracked me down, figured out how to find me with no LinkedIn, think about that. And I was literally server room to boardroom person. I was never in the media. You weren't allowed to give speeches. You didn't. No media presence. Like you do your job and you don't talk to anybody outside the bank. And so the fact that she even found me is like amazing. And then Mary made me call back because I would not have called back. And so then they had me, interview with other candidates, and I ended up being offered the job. And my family and I prayed about it, and I took the job. So that's 2006 to 2008. And then as I was leaving, when I was pregnant with my third, when I was leaving the White House, and I realized that the country had trained me on things that I did not have exposure to before. And I realized that we were not talking about cybersecurity the right way. We really were focused on, tools and all the things, users shouldn't click on links and users shouldn't open attachments. I'm like, well, that's actually their job. So that's kind of a dumb way to think about things. And, to put a product here and put a product here and put a product here, I'm like, that's also not holistic. And so I thought, you know what? I talked to my husband about it, and I just couldn't find the right firm talking about this the way I was thinking about it. My husband's like, "Yeah, why don't you just start your own business. I'm like, we don't do that in this family. We're either military, law enforcement, or like nursing. I'm like, we don't, or banking now. And he was like, oh, just try it. And if you don't like it, you can always go back. And so here we are, Fortalice Solutions. So we've been around since 2009. And we serve the Fortune 100. We serve privately held companies as well, the U.S. government, and we take care of individuals. So that's us.
Fantastic. Well, I love about the story. And as I mentioned on before we dive into some of the subjects to talk about today, being the first and only female White House CIO. So you've been on a lot of lists, right? 50 most influential women in security and stuff like that. And so I've always wrestled with, you want to be able to give women like you, like a high profile, to be able to inspire other women to get in the STEM field, to see what's possible and stuff. And Stacey, also with you, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. But also when we do lists like that, we're creating an other, right? We're kind of subsetting things. So I've always kind of struggled with, is that, are we, what do you see from your point of view? Is that advantageous to kind of have this subsection of women in security, women leaders and stuff? Or are we better off just celebrating everybody for their accomplishments, regardless of gender?
Candidly, I think it's a both, because you can go too far in either direction, right? So you could just say, look, everybody kind of fend for themselves. And if you rise to the top, you rise to the top. And we know that not everybody starts off on the same level platform. Some people start off a little further ahead than others. And so to say, well, we're all, you're going to rise to the top based on, just merit may not always be the case for everybody, because they don't get that same head start as everybody else does. But you can take it too far. And so I would hate for people to think, we only need women in cybersecurity. You can sometimes the narrative around we need more women in STEM or we need more women in cybersecurity almost sounds like, and we don't need the men anymore. And I don't like that. That makes me uncomfortable. So I always tell people I'm a huge fan of tall pole, biggest tent possible. We need everybody. Our talent shortage is enormous based on what we are facing today and what we're facing tomorrow. And we're not going to fix it by saying we need more women in cybersecurity. We need more people in cybersecurity is what we need. And so how can we value all the different gifts that different types of people bring to bear and make it more accessible and approachable? I think a big problem that we have in cybersecurity is we are not accessible and approachable. And people try to tell me, yes, we are. And then I'll point out examples of how we're not. And it's just hard for people to get outside of kind of their own habits and their own heads to see that, like, you have to know, if you don't know all the acronyms, then you're not in the club. If you don't have certain certifications, then you're not in the club. If you didn't do certain boot camps or certain classes, then you're not in the club. And I don't think that's really appropriate. So that's just kind of my take on it. But I'd love, Anthony, to hear from, Stacey and Ben on this as well.
Yeah. So thank you. I love your take on it. We have a similar take, and I definitely have a lot of words to say on a topic. So one of the things that you mentioned about you working with your alma mater, I work with mine as well. And I was part of a scholarship program that was building more diversity within STEM. So that's everyone, women, people from all different areas, aspects, just all people in general. And one of the things that I like to say about that is when I start, and I still interview for over 10 years, I'm still interviewing scholarship candidates. Some of the young ladies that I run into, they're coming in and saying, I was the only person in my school that was in robotics. I was the only person that was in computer science. And they've been made to feel less than. Some of them essentially were getting bullied by the guys that were there, like, why are you a woman here? And it's just because they're not seeing it. So when you're highlighting both aspects of it, you're also letting them know to make sure we have that large tent pole, that you can't discredit and discount and push out others, especially other women, just because you're not used to seeing them, and you're enjoying this, and young kids are growing and like, yeah, these are all my buddies, my boys, we're having fun. But don't, as you start progressing and start to grow, we need all that talent. So we don't want to discount it. So I do like highlighting it in certain aspects. So you can, like, yes, we want to put it in the forefront. We want little girls to know that we don't always have to get diverted to the cosmetology school. We don't always have to get diverted to other types of programs. But if we want to do that, we can, and we can excel at it. But every program is open to everyone. And it just wasn't happening a lot. So I'm fine with highlighting. But again, I've also had this conversation with a former coworker. I think this was maybe a day or two ago. And so it's really great that we're bringing this up now. We had a conversation with their company sort of trying to push that narrative. But to me, it was not in the best way possible, because it started making the people feel like they shouldn't maybe look at certain men or shouldn't look at this because they want to expand, instead of saying, hey, no, we want to make sure you're making your best hires possible. But we want you to understand to look at everyone, all different types of candidates. Don't just select it to the people that you're used to working with or just your one core team, but open and looking up to everyone. And I think in them trying to put that message out there, I think they were giving it to their employees the wrong way. So you're absolutely correct. I definitely agree with you. You need to look at all aspects of it. So, Ben?
Just one quick follow-up on that. I think the stats say something around 11, 12, 13 years old is when girls tend to start dropping out of the sciences, dropping out of mathematics as a focus, where they had actually been excelling up to that point. And this is based off of, stats from standardized testing and stuff. Are we getting to girls? Are we getting to talk about underrepresented people in this field early enough? Or is college too late to try to grab their attention, or by the time they're juniors or seniors in high school?
I mean, I think you should start in elementary school. And they kind of do it a little bit, but maybe put more emphasis on it. So you have career day, you have, your classmates' parents coming in talking about, their careers and things they can do. But sometimes some schools will target certain professions or what have you, but some of them just whoever's available. So I think that's an excellent opportunity where you can start showing them at a young age all the different professions, all the benefits. Let them choose. I got into tech because my dad was in tech, and I got to see it a lot, and I loved it. But I mean, my sister saw it a lot, but she got into finance. My mom's in finance. So a lot of times, if you're not seeing it at home, if you're not seeing tech at home, then you may not be open to those opportunities. So being able to see in other places, and you spend most of your time as a child in school. So I think that's a great place to look at it.
Yeah, I think if you're doing it at the high school or college level, you're way too late in the cycle and the process. I'm blessed. I have a son and a daughter. Look, I would hate for either one of them to feel that they're disadvantaged into a certain career choice or a field or an area of interest for whatever characteristic they have, right? Whether it's, neurodiversity, whether it's, sex, whether it's race, like all that stuff. It's like, I like, Theresa, you mentioned big pole, big tent, right? Like, it just really has to be everybody. And I think you have to expose people to options at a very young age. Make them aware of different career choice and paths, and like let them make the choice. But I think I feel like we overcorrect sometimes on different things, and I think that overcorrection can be part of the problem, right? Where the messaging is intended to make one group feel really good about a direction, but the unintended consequence is it pushes back on another group, whatever that group is. And I think that's what I just don't want to see that for any child, right? I want to see everybody kind of lifted up and given the opportunity. I do think in cyber, and Theresa, I'm interested in getting your thoughts as you were talking through some of this stuff. We talk about the massive amount of jobs and the massive amount of need there is for talent. Yet I participate in a couple other podcasts and do stuff, and I've had talks with other colleagues, there's a lot of people actually looking for jobs right now, right? In cyber, leadership level, individual contributors, it doesn't matter across the board. And I think some of the frustration I've heard from people is, man, I keep hearing about all these jobs that are available and I've submitted hundreds of applications and haven't gotten a call back. And I'm uber talented. And so it mixes into this discussion that we're having about like, I don't feel like I'm the right box for the fit, right? Or I think it's over. I personally do think that it's been overhyped from the market, from recruiters, from people trying to get people to do certs and boot camps and those kind of things where there's all these jobs. And I think some people get into this for the wrong reason. Like, hey, there's a lot of money in cyber and it's easy. Like, it ain't easy. There's not all that money that you think there's in it. And it's a lot of damn work. And we get, there's a lot of burnout. So it's like, get in it for the right reasons, right? So Theresa, I threw a lot out there, but I'm interested, like, what's your take on that? Do you think that there's like an overhyping of this or not?
Well, here's what I can tell you with the clients that we work with. A lot of times they'll say, like, if I'm meeting a client for the first time, they'll say, gosh, we have so many unfilled cybersecurity jobs, nobody's qualified. And I look the job description. So Ben, I mean, here's the thing.
It's like they're looking for the unicorn, right? Like everything on there doesn't work.
Yeah. And so I am very frustrated at our own industry because we're incredibly exclusionary. And so I'll look at, like, it'll say entry level because I mentor. So my undergraduates from Immaculata University, and I worked very hard with them on a cybersecurity program that's there. And then my graduate is UVA. And so I'll work with these students and I'll say, well, show me the jobs you applied for. Entry level, must have 2 years of experience. Okay, that's not entry level.
Yeah.
Entry level, must have, college degree or, and then it starts listing all these certifications. I'm like, that's actually not entry level. Entry level is work experience or degree. And then if you want them to get certifications, why don't you give them on the job?
Yeah.
So Baron, I couldn't agree with you more, but I think a big part of this is we don't really have a workforce issue. We have an unimaginative hiring management issue.
Yeah.
We're unwilling to look at somebody and say, I can teach you the things you don't know. And we're excluding so many people because they don't have OSCP or they don't have GPEN or name the alphabet soup of certifications out there that have a high, and they almost take it as a badge of honor. Like 90% of people fails this the first time. Well, then you have a crappy course getting people.
It doesn't match the expectation. So you're bringing up a really interesting point there so are there entry level cyber jobs? Right? Like, I've had this discussion with a ton of people, and my theory is there are not really a ton of entry-level cyber jobs. There are a lot of entry-level help desk, IT, other jobs, and we in cyber need to be better at bringing more people into the tent to what's a true entry-level cyber job is you have some other experience. And when I was at Visa, one of the things that I kind of tripped into, and I was like, wow, this is like, I need to think about this more as I'm hiring, is I need to hire outside of IT. I need to hire somebody with a psychology degree to come in and help change the culture of cyber within the org, because a guy with an IT or a cyber background doesn't know anything about what the human nature of how to get stuff move forward. If I'm looking at metrics, I probably want somebody from math or a quant, right? I don't want somebody from cyber because they're only looking at the same set of data they always look at and not seeing the really interesting stuff. So how do we make the tent bigger? How do we make the pole higher?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we know.
And it change. Our jobs are going to change every day because the technology changes and the criminals change.
Yeah.
And we know from our experience and, our peers that there's hardly any other industry that has more diverse backgrounds than cybersecurity. I'm always really surprised. You look at somebody who's in a leadership position and they're in security for 20 years and they've got an economics background or a philosophy background, right? Aside from stand-up comedy, I don't really know any other field where people get in to this with such diversity of their backgrounds, yet the obstacles that you're talking about make it really difficult, right? So what's the value of the certs? What's the value of now we're seeing some of these programs actually being stood up that are specific to cybersecurity and as opposed to a computer science background. And then later on, you tack on some certs. Are we seeing some real movement here in creating this funnel that we need to get the right people into this industry?
I mean, to me, I think, I've looked at a lot of the cybersecurity programs at the colleges, and they're great programs. And I think, in my humble opinion, I would like to see certifications I'd like to see us start to say or, instead of and. So it's work experience or a degree, work experience or a certification, college degree or a certification. Like, find a way to take the people who can't go to college right out of high school. They can't afford it. They can't afford not to have a salary. Right. And so find a way, or somebody decides, you know what, I'm tired of being an accountant or a veterinarian or whatever it is, and I want to try cyber. Why do we say, sure, that I love that idea. Do you have $10,000 to take a boot camp and sit for a certification? Otherwise, we can't use you. Like, come on. You're not doing brain surgery. Like you said, Ben, what are the entry-level jobs? I think one of the industries, just to brag on my alma mater of financial services, they do a pretty good job with entry-level jobs, whether it's in computer engineering, development, cybersecurity, but they have the means, right? The big banks have the means to.
Yeah, they have the size, right?
Yeah.
Like they have. So I was talking to a large financial the other day. Their IT team is like tens of thousands, and their security team is in the, it's under 10,000, but it's multiple thousands, right? I don't want to clue anybody in who it is, but like, look, when you have that amount of scale, you can have a lot of entry level people, right? Like, you can bring people along, and you can bring people along from other areas of the org. If you're trying to look at a company that's a couple hundred people, like, there's not the depth of bench. And that's the challenge, is you're looking to hire the people that can actually get the stuff done because you can't afford to, right? And so I do think if somebody's out there looking, there's a lot of value in going to larger organizations to kind of get your feet wet and find out and like learn how companies do things, right? Like, trying to start out in a very narrow cyber-oriented role at a smaller company can be really, really hard.
You know what I really think we need? You know how we have like the Peace Corps?
Cyber Corps?
Why couldn't we have a Cyber Corps and say to kids, say to anybody, hey, do you want to spend a year or two in the Cyber Corps? And basically you take a rotational assignment, just like the Peace Corps, and you get trained, and you're helping out a group that really needs you. And then you've got skills, and then you figure out if you like the job or not too. But in the meantime, you're serving. I don't know. I mean,
I love that concept, because when you earlier said like we have this large demand or need for talent, right, and people for cyber, because I do believe there's a big void. I think part of the challenge is, and I see this, I think I see it on the government side a lot, but I also see it in somewhat in industry, is there's a lot of stuff to do that people just, I don't know, they have other priorities and they don't ever get to. But I see such a void in cyber readiness that I think something like that could add a lot to, if you could get people to participate where there was a lot of additional capacity to throw at large problems that we're not addressing now holistically as a nation, right? And that's a national security issue.
And then, Theresa, also want to know, what do you think about, let's say, even from that same aspect with internships, right? Essentially considering them for, or getting high school students in businesses to leverage the high school students. So for those that may not have the opportunities to keep going on to getting undergraduate and graduate degrees, or even those that are going to do that where they can carry their internship out. So then technically you've started that true entry level, and you built them all the way up into professionalism. What are your thoughts on that aspect?
I love it. And I see for my mid to large size clients, they're doing that. And so for those people are saying cyber people need to be allowed to work at home 100%. In high school, internships are really hard to do when nobody goes to the office. Mm-hmm. These young people, and if you think about anybody sort of 25 and younger, there was about 2 years of lockdown. So if you're 20 years old, 2 years of lockdown is 10% of your life. You spend 10% of your life with a mask on, virtual school, and you missed out on a lot. And then you've got a group of people who entered the workforce at that time. So I hate to say it because I know a lot of people, I'm working from my home office today. For example, I was in the Uptown office the last 3 days this week with my Charlotte staff. But I have to tell people, like, if you want to train, coach, and mentor young people, high school, college, people changing careers, they have to be able to go somewhere and bump shoulders and work on work and have casual conversations. I am the executive I am today because I walked out of a meeting, somebody cared enough about me to walk with me to get a cup of coffee and give me coaching that would have been very hard to take in a screen on Teams or Zoom. But we're getting a cup of coffee and we're having that. And I try to pay that forward by making sure if people want to spend the time with me in person, I go. Anthony, part of the reason why is like, I try to fly around and see my team as well. So that, and I'll be like, where do you want to work from? We've got an office in Charlotte, but not everybody else has an office. And so we'll go somewhere and we'll work together for the day. And it's those conversations and mentoring, Stacey, like you mentioned, and it will not happen for the high school, the college, and the career changers unless people are willing to be in person. So that's one tough thing. And then I think the other thing that you have to do too for those high schoolers and the any type of internship is have somebody who kind of takes ownership of them and make sure that there's a good curriculum, they're working on things, and that they're checking in on them, making sure they have things to do, so to speak.
Well, I'll say that that's probably the most convincing argument for back to the office that I've heard is in bringing up that next generation, right? That I hadn't really thought about that as a challenge before. I also just mentioned that a lot of folks think of this as an extremely technical field. There's a lot of roles in security that are not technical. I do communications, right? The research. There are a lot of roles within cybersecurity that aren't specifically in a SOC as an analyst, hands on keyboards fighting the bad guys. So.
Yeah, Anthony, I was going to give you a hard time and say, yeah, you're a perfect example of that. Like super non-technical, but yeah, able to get a job done. I love it.
Let's talk a little bit about ransomware. There's been a couple of things that happened here in the last month or so that are interesting. I'll just bring up 3 examples. Around some of these new tactics. We had a report of the Akira ransomware gang. They use an unsecure webcam to bypass security controls, bypass EDR, and compromise the victim. Medusa ransomware, who has been really handling on critical infrastructure targets and stuff, has a tool called Abyss Worker, which was able to bypass and disable EDR basically. And then I think that was also part of bringing on vulnerable Drygo top, which is something that's getting more attention right now. And then now Ransom Hub has an EDR killer tool that's been showing up in attacks by other groups. So Medusa, Beyond Leon, Play. So now we're starting to see some tooling being shared between some of these more prevalent groups and stuff. Adversaries are leveraging unconventional entry points like the webcams and Trojanized apps and stuff, regularly bypassing APP, EDR protections. What are some of the challenges this poses to these traditional cybersecurity defense frameworks that everybody has been leaning on for the last 20 years? We'll start with Theresa.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a huge gut punch to kind of the static playbooks that I think a lot of firms are working off of. Because your challenge here is like, how do you see what's coming next? And legacy systems are, they're almost like your feet are in like frozen concrete, right? And so, like, that's the thing. It's really hard, and that this is where even the work that you guys are doing is so important because there's the hunting of the threats, not just blocking them. And there's the trying to be anticipatory. And then if you don't mind, I kind of want to riff on something a little here because, yeah. So like our fourth quarter as a company absolutely broke my heart. It was the biggest revenue quarter we've had in the history of my company. And the majority of it was because of incident response and because of ransomware. And just, we're a different type of company. We literally hold, we are with our clients through everything. And I have to say, so when all of the products that were installed, maybe they weren't configured right, when the products fail and the processes fail, and then the outside firms swoop in, it's like there's this fixation on, okay, let's pay off the threat actors or let's engage the threat actors and let's have these like drawn out dances. And it's all billed on the victim's time and the victim's dime. I got to say, like, because I work with a lot of healthcare organizations. And so they talk all about how are we spending our money, resources, and time on better patient outcomes. And I got to say, outcomes for us in cyber are not improving. Our approaches are stagnant. Product companies are peddling tools. IR teams have they're clinging to these, kind of these tired playbooks. And then the victim is broken. So I want to challenge all of us in cybersecurity. Like, we've got to reimagine this game, like the whole thing. And stop talking about, well, somebody clicked on a link and somebody opened an attachment or somebody had a recycle password or somebody had RDP not configured right. Would you please stop? Just assume all of those things are true at all times. So what are we all going to do differently? Because this isn't working. And I can't take another quarter like that. Like, it literally broke my heart. I had people just absolutely broken. And me just saying like, look, I've never lost a CIO or CISO. I've never had anybody get fired for being a good person and doing the best they can with what they have to work with. And I'll go to bat for you, but you got to listen to me and you got to do everything we tell you to do here. But the hard thing is, like, these groups swoop in under cyber liability insurance and they all have their own playbook. And I'm not saying they're not well-intentioned, but the patient outcomes, the victim outcomes are not getting better. So I think we all have to ask ourselves a question. Like, we have to do this and say, why are things not getting better? And what role do we have to play in that? Right? So our calling cannot be to continue, like, profit's important to be a going concern as a company. Like, I like profit. It helps me pay my employees. But our calling has to be getting away from fear and doom and profiting off of what goes wrong and focusing on how are we making clients thrive and survive. And anything less than that is a betrayal of trust. So that's my riff. Thank you for letting me have it. And I what you are doing, because you're making such a difference here.
Well, I know Ben and Stacey will have plenty to say on this. I'll just chime in first with blaming the end user. I always hate it because it's not a receptionist's job. It's not an engineer's job. It's to do cybersecurity, right? Obviously, we want to have some awareness and not be reckless in our online behavior and whatnot. But that whole idea that one click from Joe in this department undermines $1 million worth of security stack is a big fail on our part. Stacey, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so, I mean, you're looking at these, I would say, improved attacks, right? From all these different ransomware companies where, they may have started with just in-house developers and now they're growing to be more ransomware as a service, and they're using different brokers to work through these type of sophisticated attacks. And as an organization, you think that you've put the tools in place, like, hey, I've got my EDR in place, I got XDR, I'm here, I'm there. And then they're like, okay, well, these tools are going to use your routine processes so we can bypass your systems. And then you always want, and always, because I'm one of the ones like, oh yeah, sometimes it's the end user. We forgot to do this, we forgot to do that. But sometimes I like to be able to do things. I have a joke. I'm like, yeah, I just want to click a button and know that everything's going to be okay. So if I did something the wrong way, or if I did something and it ended up being malicious, that I do know that there are certain things in place. And not to really plug Halcyon, even though I'm about to plug Halcyon, I think we have a really great tool that will allow that to happen within your organization. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really behind the actual product. So those types of things, that comfort level, okay, we need to make sure that these tools are staying on top of these things and going as fast or faster than some of these attackers, and then getting that information out, and not just expecting organizations, because you have companies that are different sizes. You've got small businesses, the little guy. And now that you have all these ransomware groups and ransomware as a service, yes, there are targets for large revenue organizations, but some of them, it's a numbers game. So if I can get 5K here, if I can get this here, if I target all of these small companies, it's going to add up. So we have to be able to look out that. And how do we do that? I think these partnerships with private industry, with academia, with government, right? So whether it's state, local, whether it's federal, all these types of initiatives that are happening to help. Let's go out there. Let's identify these groups. Let's do it on a larger level, right? So now we're combating this from a worldwide perspective, and not just expecting organizations and enterprises to take this on for themselves. So, yeah.
Well, that's kind of where we are, though, isn't it? I mean, it's basically organizations that are being targeted are kind of fending for themselves. So CISA's done a great job in providing resources like the vulnerability database, so you can go see which are the most active exploits tied to ransomware operations. They've also produced the guidelines, alerts, frameworks, and we've talked about this before. But is the federal government doing enough? I mean, these are some fairly advanced TTPs that we're talking about. This isn't it doesn't look like your armchair cyber criminal. There seems to be a great deal of evidence that there's overlap in tooling and resources from what we're seeing in what were exclusively APT nation state style operations to now kind of filtering into these cybercrime groups. And then, of course, Russia plays a big role in a lot of these major cybercrime groups. And as I mentioned, you see Ransom Hub's EDR killers showing up in Medusa, Beyond play attacks, all tied to probably Russian operators with fairly high confidence. Is it fair, Theresa, to have these organizations, you're a hospital, having to stand up to nation state style attacks?
No. And, this is where, if we can get really smart people in the room to talk through this, I think there's a combination of, just threat intel and threat briefings alone isn't going to stop bad things from happening. And so the question is how do we get our internet service providers, our cellular providers, the equipment manufacturers and the product companies, and really brainstorm a different way around anticipating, detecting, thwarting these different types of attacks that are hitting them. I mean, wouldn't it be great if certain things, whether it's you decide to be a Microsoft shop or a Google shop or something else, if literally as you're trying to install and operate, if it doesn't automatically start doing the security configurations for you, that, now with AI, if you think about old Microsoft with Clippy, with Clippy, what if we had cloud and on-prem security configuration by Clippy? What if, as people were taking stuff out of the box and installing it and setting things up and provisioning users and provisioning applications, you had a new version of Clippy, walking people through the things they needed to know and they needed to do. And the technology is there. We just have to be more creative in our thinking to say, how do we engage, empower, and enable the end user here so that, instead of them having to, go to certification class to figure out how to do certifications and hopefully not miss anything. And then we move them into a different role. Now a new person comes in the role, and what are they, all the things that can go wrong. Wouldn't it be great if there was some type of almost like an AI helper that was helping the technology teams with all the configurations? That would also not only reduce that attack surface because it's a different design, but it would leave less of that type of stuff for the security team to do. And then if you had AI also double checking configurations and giving people warnings like these are considered to be unsafe configurations based on past events, those again could be certain things that just sort of help people trust but verify that everything's working as designed and hoped.
Smaller reason, wouldn't people click, yeah, do it anyway? Like that's been my experience is because I know as a CISO, when I tell the board or the C staff, hey, this isn't a smart idea, they just say, yeah, let's do it anyway. Like,
I don't know. Maybe you need a good GIF to give them to go with that or something.
maybe no.
Or give them, I don't know, create some TikToks. And so Ben Carr TikToks.
Something that engages more directly. Okay. I gotta dance while I'm pitching it. I understand.
Oh, you're right, Ben. I mean, that is a challenge because, kind of that risk versus reward, and then who accepts risk, and then what does that transference of risk mean, and what does it look like? So if somebody says, let's do it anyways, how do we help people understand the potential outcome of the let's do it anyway?
Yeah, I think it's the outcome, and also look, I think a lot of people, at least in my experience, see like the potential likelihood of it happening is low, right? Even though the opportunity cost is extremely high on the backside if it does manifest. And every time you see a breach or, look at large healthcare thing that happened right last year, like you look at, they probably could have spent a lot less than that and gotten a lot of impact on security. It might not have fixed everything, but the investment that people put in once a breach happens is always much less than the cost of the breach. But the challenge is, people look at it and they say, yeah, it's probably really unlikely that that's going to happen. And is it really is going to be as bad as you say? And it's hard to make that connection in people's mind that yes, it really will be that bad. And yes, it might not be super likely, but if it does happen, what would be our response to that?
Yeah. And isn't part of the challenge also that a successful security program means nothing happens?
Nothing happens. Yeah.
Next time you go to the board, are they looking at you as a possibly this value?
Yeah, you got to have your recovery processes in there. But I think like, especially with sometimes you're looking at different organizations or companies, they don't have that inside expertise or they haven't invested in that inside expertise. And sometimes I'm a firm believer you don't necessarily have to have it. That's why you have partners, right? You have the right teams to reach out to. No one's expecting you to 24, or I guess with 9 to 5, we won't make everybody work all day, but 9 to 5 staff certain positions that you only need for 8 weeks out of the year. So that's why you do those consulting services or contracting services, those retainer services, the ones where you can actually bring the high level experts in, because it's just not fiscally responsible to have certain things on staff continuously that you only need occasionally. So those types of things I think should be taken into consideration as well. Don't just because you haven't been susceptible to certain incidents that you don't want to plan in the event that you will have to deal with it.
And a lot of what we're talking about requires tremendous resources. So we're talking about large organizations being able to do this. SMBs are just getting hammered. They don't necessarily have dedicated CISOs, dedicated security teams. They've got IT teams who are wearing a security hat as well. Are we doing enough to be able to support the SMBs?
We can always do more. I'm a firm believer we can always do more. What I am seeing is the efficacy of tools has improved tremendously. So coming from being a consultant, working with a lot of different organizations everywhere, whether it's government, finance, healthcare, gaming and entertainment, all the different types of organizations, and being able to experience a lot of different tools and going into places and looking at people spending all this money on crap tools. And I feel bad. It's like, I'm very direct and upfront. And I'm like, okay, let's do a one-on-one here. Your tool sucks. I'm sorry that you spent all this money here, but you're not getting the benefit from it. And then sometimes, what were your options? But I think now in 2025, we have a lot of options. Some things that Theresa was mentioning earlier, and even been touching on those things, talking about looking at your different configurations and security and what have you. There's a lot of tools that you can do now that everyone's embracing AI, right? But I mean, you want to make sure you get the right tools. So I just said this the other day, right? You need to try your tools out like your shoes, right? You try before you buy. So those types of things, you want to make sure you're like, okay, wow, this tool really is doing what I need. But you have to make sure it's for your organization, right? So if I have a tool that's looking for generative AI and I don't have any generative AI in my environment, then that's probably not the right tool for me. But if I have a tool that's looking at my configurations, for my cloud configurations, and reviewing those and saying, hey, this S3 bucket looks over permissioned, or whatever else that it's looking at, those types of things that you're like, oh, this can really benefit my organization. So now I don't have to take my IT administrator and have them going through manually doing these checks or running reports, when let's let the tools work for us.
Well, you bring up a good point there, and Ben, interested to hear what you have to say about this one. So sometimes it's a long process to bring a vendor in, and so it's then becomes a long commitment because of the resources that are put into it. Sometimes entire small teams have to be spun up to support some of these tools and stuff. And then if they're not effective necessarily for that particular environment, some of these, sometimes they're kind of forced to double down, right? And stay committed to a tool for a longer term, because rip and replace is such a huge process and requires another huge investment. And it almost looks like the first investment was a loss.
That's one of the challenges for the CISO, right? Like when you have this role and you're running an organization, like your selection of, I think it's both. It's probably more important on the resource side, like the people you're hiring. I think people are always more important than the tools you're bringing on, and hopefully those people are bringing on the right tools. But the tool selection is also difficult as well, right? Because you want to, like, is it the hype? Is it just the most advertised and marketed tool out there? Is it the most efficacious tool out there? Like, what are you really selecting from a tool? And does it fit with your org, right? That's the other thing. Like, some tools are really great, but I think it's, as Stacey mentioned, like, if it's not a fit for what you're trying to do, if you're looking at a bunch of generative AI security tools and like you're still just shipping toilet paper, like probably not what you should be looking at, right? A lot of people don't focus on the basics. Like, I don't know. I haven't heard of an organization yet. I haven't seen one. Maybe there's one that exists, and maybe Theresa, you may have run across one that has 100% coverage of great asset management and understands their complete infrastructure and deployment environment, right? Hard infrastructure to cloud. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen somebody that's doing vulnerability management like super, super well. Very few organizations, right? And part of that's because they don't have good asset management to rely on. If you don't know your cloud and you don't know what you're deploying there, that's super hard. I do think when you're deploying tools now, SaaS brings positives and negatives. I think one of the things about like a lot of cloud services, it's a lot easier to switch, right? Like that's the challenge of keeping your recurring revenue up. Like if you're a vendor company, if you're not doing the right thing for your customers, they will switch to something else. But from an end user, yeah, I love that. Like if you're not meeting the requirements that I need, I can pivot to something else really quickly. But yeah, it's the internal, it's the selling of the CISO internally to say we made a mistake, right? That's always bad. That's a difficult thing. And I'm sure, Theresa, like you must talk to people all the time that have had to go back and have those discussions, right? But you have it early, like don't let it wait and linger. That's the worst.
I mean, working in like certain places, I've seen a 18-month, $1.5 million mistake, right? So
Yeah.
$1.5 million spent on development on this tool that was supposed to save the world of the organization, and $1.5 million and 18 months later had to start from scratch. So at some point, I think that's just his poor project management, but we'll leave that alone. But sometimes you really got to get in and look at, and then when you bring these tools in, right? I'm looking at different things like, what is my overhead, right? Do I have the team to manage this? I can't bring something in if it's just going to sit there and I can say I have it, but I'm not going to get any benefit of that. So I don't want to do that. And I got to look forward. Everything you do, you need to look forward. What does this look like a year later, 3 years later, maybe even 5 years later, right? How does this work? A lot of things I'm bringing in, I'm like, what is the direction that the organization is going? And will this tool work with us? Will it move with us? Is this going to overcommit us to a particular vendor? Because like you're saying, things are changing and changing rapidly. So maybe a tool works for us, but 3 years later, they didn't keep up. And now we have to move. We have to do what's right for the organizations. And Theresa made lots of points about vendors being able to support this, right? So why are we still getting popped of 3-year-old vulnerabilities why is that happen, right? So where does that burden fall on? Not just the vulnerability management teams, but what are these vendors doing as well?
Ben and Stacey, so spot on with your comments. And also just a piece of advice, since you're, a product and solutions provider. I heard this more than once, but it came up this week in a client outbrief that my team and I did. And I'm sitting at the table next to the senior executive, senior sponsor. And he said to me, every couple of years, we have turnover in these roles. And that means that there could be things on these tools that we purchased that we just didn't get to on the roadmap, the person turning the dials and doing the things. And then every couple of years, people rotate into different positions, and then it's all new people, and they don't know the tool does that thing. They're familiar with another tool. Then they want to buy a different tool. And he was like, so we're going to need and the product companies don't keep up with us to say, hey, remember, you guys were going to do this roadmap. Have you done the roadmap? Do you have anything? And he said, the challenge is you don't want to bring the product vendors in because then they're going to try and sell to you. But I think the biggest thing, for example, that you could do, I think, is just sort of almost be that institutional knowledge for each of your clients, because they get busy, they get sidetracked, or people get promoted and move on. So if you can remind people, you've already paid for this feature. I don't know if you've used it. Would you like a demo of these features that you might not be using? Like, I think Stacey and Ben, based on, the things that you both just said there, that's another missing piece that I think a lot of times solutions vendors don't even think about, which is, they bought our thing. I guess they're happy with our thing. And be thinking about the fact that, they might have gotten sidetracked on the roadmap and literally had to put some other fire out and they forgot and they haven't come back. And you want to make sure they use every single feature possible that they've already bought, because that's how you kind of, give them the most value for the investment. So I just want to pass that on, because not everybody has that front row seat, sitting next to an executive who, as an aside, as we're changing topics and moving things around, was like, hey, I need to say something. I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a real challenge. So we're going to help them look at all of the tools they have and optimize what they have so that they can keep their cap spend low, but maximize their roadmap based on things they already bought.
Yeah, we used to do quarterly reviews with vendors, right? And a lot of people do that, but a lot of people do it as a one-sided event. They do a quarterly review and they tell the vendor everything that's messed up with the vendor, right? What I used to tell my vendors is, I want you to tell me what's wrong with us. What aren't we doing? What could we improve? How could we create a better partnership? And I found that the vendors who I invested more in were the ones that actually treated it like a partnership and had that, they were trying to make us better as well, not just a revenue return for the vendor. So yeah, I completely agree, Theresa.
That sounds like a good opportunity for an upsell conversation. We've covered a lot here. I want to pivot one more time here to talk a little bit about your last book, Theresa, Manipulated. So, this is, I feel honored because, you've been on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, Good Morning America, all kinds of shows talking about this book. Tell us a little bit about Manipulated, what inspired you to write it and what kind of impact it's had since it's come out.
Yeah, no, thank you, Anthony. And it's out in its second edition. So if anybody wants the most updated, it's only available in paperback in second edition. So But it's a book that almost didn't happen. And Anthony, you know that because I came to you with the idea. I think it was probably before 2016 that I had this idea that, I was seeing our own clients being manipulated on social media and getting pretty frustrated because their manipulation was leading to lots of unintended consequences, business email compromise, romance fraud, you name it. And I thought, well, if it's not going to end there, it's going to go to, taking propaganda, which has been around since two human beings have been walking the earth. It's going to take propaganda to a whole nother level and impact global elections. So I kept trying to talk to my book agent about this. And she was like, well, what's the fix? I'm like, there is no fix. And she's like, well, that's horrible. Nobody wants to read a book that's awful and there's no fix.
A book without an ending.
So I had to keep working on the concept and finally got it to a point where she could pitch it and Roman and Littlefield, it's now part of Bloomsbury, agreed, like, I think this would be a very interesting book. And so the premise of the book is that, if you create a big tech and social media platform around all of us where you can't believe what you see and hear, and you get bombarded because the algorithm, when you come back, gives you more of what you came for last time. So it's like if you just eat a piece of misinformation, when you come back the next time, you're going to get more and you're going to get more. And if you've got if you've got a hidden, unknown to your own self confirmation bias, you're going to just keep seeing it and think like, aha.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, the first book actually came out before the 2016 election, and then the second book came out before the 2020 election. So each chapter opens up again. So it's a nonfiction book, but in the first pass, my book agent said, this is so horrifying and things that I haven't thought about before. I don't think people can handle what you're saying. So I think what you have to do is write it as like fictional stories and then back it up with the book and the research. So each chapter opens up with like a fictional vignette, including like, if we do nothing, this is the outcome. If we do something, it's a different outcome. And so that's kind of the premise of the book. I did predict a contested 2020 election. I don't predict Super Bowl winners or March Madness winners, but I could just see the writing on the wall, that there would be, a contested election. And this is a global book. So this is not just for the United States. And it's not just about politics because I'm not a politician. I'm just a person who loves my country, and who loves the idea of being in a republic and a democracy and the fact that we can all have different points of view and still love each other. I am in all ways a tall pole, big tent person. And I love humanity and I love our country. And so that's why I wrote the book was, even if people read it and were like, it's all right. Like that was okay. I just felt called and led to write the book. And what it's done, Anthony, is it's really opened up my mindset because, as you know, I kind of had the feeling that manipulation was either a marketing play to get you to buy something or a propaganda play to try and put a certain person in office or make somebody lose. But what I learned during the process that I did not expect was the loads of money everybody makes while we're being manipulated. That was the part I didn't, eyes wide open, like logically that makes total sense now. But when I went in with my research, I was like, there's two kinds of groups. This is why they do it. And, one's for money and one's for political gain. And then, but like at the end, like when I really got down to the bottom of it, I'm like, no, it's about loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of money. And so while we're all getting manipulated, big tech makes money, social media makes money, the fraudsters and the scammers make money. And oh, by the way, nation states are money laundering through click ads and making money every time we get mad at each other or stop speaking to each other or repost something. So if anybody, reads the book and, the one lesson I would like everybody to take away is please meet other people with grace and space and patience if they fall down into that rabbit hole. and I would want somebody to do the same for me. You will not bring them to the truth if you tell them they've been duped. And it's really more important to me that people can sit around the holiday table or be together. When I hear about people saying, I don't speak to somebody anymore because they voted for this person or they felt this way, I don't, that to me is manipulation at its absolute terrible worst. And that's what I was trying to avoid with the book.
And you were right on the cusp of this. You and Clint Watts had a book come out about the same time. I think in Flint. Very like, I don't want to say prophetic, but you guys were right on top of this issue as it was unfolding. It's really interesting.
Well, and Anthony, you were very kind to make sure Clint and I got to meet with each other. You brokered that, and so I interviewed Clint for the book, and he and I talked about his book as well. And one other thing, Anthony's being very humble here. So through his process of a podcast he was running then, he and rest in peace, Matt Stevenson, they introduced me to a person who had actually run an incredibly sophisticated manipulation campaign that he created because he was told, make us loads of money, make sure Hillary Clinton doesn't get elected, and have a self-destruct button so no one ever finds out. And he was part of all three of those things, and he got away with it. Interestingly enough, they had a lot of lawyers, and he kept saying things like, well, the lawyers would say technically we didn't break the law, but I will say he definitely bent the guardrails of the law pretty far.
Sure, he did. And in a way, he was also manipulated because this was kind of a new space. So I don't think he realized exactly the implications of what he was doing. This was just like, he was kind of caught up in the moment of it. And of course was very exciting for him. So I think we fondly refer to him as Hacker X, unidentified person, but who was literally running these operations on social media before the 2016 election.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't even know where to go with that. I just don't see a positive, man, I've had so many conversations with people around this. Like, I don't see a positive outcome of this because, as you say, it's dump trucks full of cash that people back up and dump off, right? Like the negative incentive is so much larger than the positive one, right? The void of truth is so much larger than the truth itself. Like, how do you see a positive way out of this? I mean, I worry about my kids, right? I've got younger kids still in high school and one just getting into high school. And I just see like everything is about the media presence that they have and the connectivity, and it's not built on these individual face-to-face conversations, negotiations, discussions. And so, the lack of that physical presence, I think, brings a lot of potential negativity into it. And I don't know. I haven't found the positivity of like, okay, I see the exit from this. I just see it keep going down the hole further and further.
I think one of the best things we can do, and there are countries like Finland, for example, they do PSAs for every age from 0 to 100 plus. And so they really think about these different age groups, and they do digital citizenship in the K through 12. They have it in the workplace, and then they do public service announcements. So I think culturally we have to find the right thing for us. So something, for example, that South Korea does, they actually have something called a humor, not rumor. And they pay comedians to take misinformation and sort of like in a comedic way present the truth, which is pretty interesting. So there's a lot of different things depending on culture that you can do. I will tell you, to your point, Ben. So I, for both versions of the book, I went into like high school classrooms and college classrooms. And one of the questions I ask, and I write about this in the book, is who wants to share with me where you get your daily source of news? And the first thing I answered, I said, by show of hands, how many of you take a moment to watch like the nightly news or any of these stations? So I name all the usual suspects, and only one hand went up in all of the classes I visited. And she raised her hand. She says, I watch NBC nightly news with my parents. And I said, well, that is good parenting. And then the rest of now sometimes my own kids are in the room, so of course they'll raise their hand and say, "Well, we have the Wall Street Journals on the table every morning." So I always look at the Wall Street Journal, and I'm like, also good parenting. But not to give commercials to NBC and Wall Street Journal, but the rest of the students, they get their news from, first it was Instagram,
Yeah.
Reddit, Twitch, and then TikTok.
It's kind of sad. I mean, I've often said, like, where's the Walter Cronkite of our era, right? Like, it just, just the news, no opinion, just the news.
Yeah, YouTube is the source of their news.
Have we lost, objective truth? So I have a friend who's anti-vax, who can point to actual doctors who have written reports that, so objectively valid sources of information, although their sources of information are not necessarily valid, right? They've been part of, I think the anti-vax campaign is a Russian disinformation campaign that goes back to the 70s, well before the advent of the internet, that really took off at that point, Have we lost our ability to, or do we need to do a better job at teaching kids how to think critically and understand what are valid sources of truth?
Yeah, I mean, candidly, when it comes to big tech and social media, we are failing our children. And by that, I mean anybody under the age of, kind of 25 and younger. I know 20-year-olds don't think they're of themselves as children, but we are failing them because we haven't put the right safeguards in place around romance scams and, the porn extortion that's going on, the bullying that goes on. There's way too many victims. And if we did a better job, not only working with big tech and social media saying, you got to do better, just like we don't let cigarette companies sell cigarettes to children. We don't let booze companies sell alcohol to small children. There has to be a better way to do this. But at the same time, if we could in the schools, tell children there's a safe place you can go to talk about these issues. I know you're not going to get grounded from the internet forever, because children tell Pew Research every year they don't go to a trusted adult because they're afraid you'll take their phone away. They're afraid you'll ground them from the internet if they come and tell you what's going on. So we have to create sort of these safe zones for them that when they see something that makes them uncomfortable or sad or have suicidal thoughts, or they somehow get tricked into sending pictures they shouldn't be sending, we have to make a safe place for them to say, I'm going to give you a hug for coming to me. And we're going to work on this problem together. And we just don't have the right resources, and we're failing them. We're absolutely failing them. And we're failing them on digital citizenship as well. So studies show that the people that are most likely to fall prey to online fraud, like clicking on a link in a text or responding to something, are the elderly and the 17 to 25. And that is a failure of all of us, because we moved everything to sort of mobile. We showed them for 2 years during lockdown, everything could be virtual. And we grew up in an analog time where we know how to live analog and we know how to live digital. And they're mostly digital natives, right? And so we have to do better by them. And it starts with digital citizenship, in my mind, Anthony.
I mean, Todd, really, that is the point that I really love right there. Because a lot of times I look at how we've evolved, even from an educational standpoint. When we were younger, we're taught how keyboarding, right? And it wasn't a piano; it was learning your QWERTY keyboard, right? So you learn how to do that. I don't think they teach them that anymore. But those types of things that you learned growing up, and we haven't done a good job of keeping up with the times that are changing, right? In this digital age, we didn't teach them how to be good digital citizens online. You have what I call these keyboard warriors who get behind the keyboard, and then they can just say whatever because now they're not going to get punched in the face. Because literally that's what we grew up at. You said something, we're going to fight it out in the yard, and
but we're not advocating punching anyone in the face either, though. Just to be clear,
I mean, maybe, Ben, who are we talking about here? Are we talking about Putin, or who are we talking about here?
All right, if you want to dive down that road, like there was something to be said, getting taught a lesson on the playground if like you got out of line, right? Like there is a lack of interpersonal skills. Like, and I think you said digital citizenship, and I think you just mentioned citizenship earlier. Like we don't do any of that at school anymore. Like we don't tell people like this is the right way to behave. It's kind of gotten out of that. And I think, yeah, I don't know. It's that's part of the challenge itself. We need to get back to being better people to each other.
Right. And then even about getting help. So my daughter used to, in middle school, my oldest daughter would go to the counselor on her own, just go to the school counselor and have a conversation. And that actually helped her. But not all kids are going to do that. And she would see her friends struggling. So then she would bring them to the school counselor. And the counselor's like, hey, your daughter's like my biggest salesperson. She just keeps bringing people into my office. But she realized she got help. And that's someone that's not going to take your phone away because they're not your mom. And that's someone that's going to be able to, if give you that safe space, maybe if you don't have one. And my daughter realized that. But again, you have to have great counselors, but she realized that in the school counselor. And those types of things that she's in college now, that she still takes those lessons with her. But how do we get that to the masses? How's everybody doing that? I'm a firm, but again, I told you before, the kids spend most of their time in school. Can we get this into part of curriculums, right? There's so many other things that just had to be just generally good humans, that if we did that young enough, then we would have better humans as they got older. But whole nother topic.
No, I'm just be devil's advocate, and we'll close out this segment in the show. We've blown past an hour. So let's say we were to devise some adequate controls, some further education and stuff on the digital citizenship and stuff. Doesn't that inherently then, who controls the controls, right? Aren't we potentially introducing another avenue for influence if there's control over the information? I know that's probably the biggest argument for not providing controls is the internet's supposed to be a free space. Anybody can put out anything they want, right? It's up to the consumer to have some sense of and critical thinking capabilities to be able to sort it out. But so, Theresa, suppose with this, if we do controls, are there challenges with that approach?
Yes, but just like, do you remember growing up and seeing like at the grocery store checkout, like those newspapers like the Inquirer, and it'd be like alien babies were found and things like we all knew kind of like the categories of things that were available to us. And so you could buy that and read it and decide whether or not alien babies were born in the United, and by alien, I mean from outer space. So you could decide whether or not really UFOs were at Area 59 and all those things that you could read there, but everything had its like category, right? So I think there is an opportunity here through technology, but also transparency. And I think this is where social media and big tech have gone wrong, is they'll say, well, we've got a governance process for removing things. Well, there was no transparency to that. And I've been saying for over a decade, it would behoove us if there would be some sort of third-party governance that and some transparency that would say we've got all different types of ideas and backgrounds around the table that are holding governance over our automated yet human curated process for dealing with things that, one, the community flags, and two, that our AI anomalous detection technology tells us this could be problematic. And so if people would have transparency around that and have some kind of third-party governance saying, hey, I've got some concerns, or I don't have concerns, or good job, or whatever it is, then people would be more accepting of like, okay, well, I don't agree, but I know there's a process to make sure that there's some kind of vetting going on here. But there is no bouncer at the door, and there's no necessarily like trained journalists. There's a lot of like publishing of different points of view and different videos and things like that. And so, yes, freedom of speech in the United States is definitely something that is protected. But lying and inciting riots is not protected, right? Inciting people to do damage to things or hurt people, that's not protected speech. So we have to find the right way through crowdsourcing and technology and transparency. And that's where accountability will happen, is because if it's transparent how decisions get made, how the community flags things, and how things get resolved. I mean, wouldn't it be great, Anthony, if you remember when big tech started publishing, well, law enforcement, if you're going to keep asking us for stuff, and we're going to report it to everybody. We're going to let everybody see law enforcement asked this many times and we denied because they didn't have the paperwork. And remember how they made a big deal about that transparency? Well, why don't you do it on this topic? Wouldn't it be great? So if all big tech and social media said the community, out of X amount of traffic, the community reported this many things for us to look at, and we decision, here's the pie chart of how we decision things. We also run our own algorithms and we flag this much stuff, and this is how we did it. But I've never seen a transparency report like that. Have you, Anthony?
No, never. And we know we've also taken kind of a step or two backwards in the filtering, the control, giving users more information about the information they're seeing, the sources, the validity. We're kind of, I think we started that crowdsourced. It's still there a little bit, but it's not effective at all. I mean, we're nowhere close to where we need to be. And that's probably a good place to wrap, right? We can keep doing this.
Anthony, Oprah, you give her a run for her money, and Ben and Stacey, what incredible backgrounds you two have, and just appreciate you so much. And it's been great to spend this time with you and Anthony, just have a really great conversation.
Yes, thank you, Stacey.
I was already formulating the email I'm sending you after this.
Yeah, I'd love to connect you at RSA if we are available, Theresa. So thank you, Stacey. Thank you, Ben. Theresa, thank you as always. Where can everybody find your books? What do you have coming up next? This is your big plug spot, and I'll have links in the blog and stuff for everybody to find it as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I have an incredible team who pushes me to be a better version of myself besides my family, but incredible team at fortalice You can find us there. And we've got corporate accounts on LinkedIn, on X, for those of you that might be on X. And then I'm on Instagram, X, LinkedIn. Those are places you can find me. And, but I use those very differently. LinkedIn is, pretty much going to be straight up on all the business stuff. And then for the books, you can buy them at your favorite independent booksellers. I love to support family-run bookstores. If you like a signed copy, Park Road Books in Charlotte, wonderful. Been around a long, long time, and they will call me and say, "You have a book order. Can you come in here and sign it, please?" And they ship to anywhere in the world. Certainly, you could buy it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble online if you wanted to as well.
I highly recommend the read. Again, Theresa, thank you so much for your time. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next month.